I've been reading through all this stuff here. What's a repast?
A repast is when everybody come back after the funeral and eat.
Everybody comes back and eats?
Yes.
Well, after the funeral, do people come to Alameda, so like a visitation after a funeral?
Yes.
Okay.
Hey guys, so that is a very important little thing just to make a mental note of, right? What you've seen there is a joke. You've seen the housekeeper, her name is Shelly, and she just sort of laughed about something, and you're going to see a total switch around, which is going to go from chuckling and sort of laughing to being in tears, right? And what is the source of that? Why is she so distressed? And so I want you to think about that as we proceed through this, right? So now she's being asked to talk about seeing Alex Murdaugh the first time since the murders, right? And so let's listen to that.
Did folks come over there then?
Yes.
Okay. And was the family there then?
Yes.
And during this repast, visitation, where were you? And I said, what was your job during that, or what were you doing during the visitation?
I was in the room with Miss Libby, just back and forth.
And sometime that afternoon, did you see Alex Murdaugh?
Yes.
Okay.
So those are the circumstances. Is basically what has happened is 3 days after the murders, Alex's father has died, and now they're actually at the mother's home, right, to have a repast, right, to have a visitation. And that's what they're all doing there. And what's actually happening is Alex Murdaugh is now encountering the housekeeper, his mother's housekeeper, for the second time. And now she's going to talk about what he says to her, right, during this encounter. Now, he actually saw her the last time, the night of the murders. And so now she's going to talk about seeing him at this funeral, right, for his father, within the context that his wife and child have now also died. And now what is going to kind of happen during this encounter? Let's listen. But take note how her demeanor changes, her expression changes. She's just made a joke, right?
Tell the jury about that, please.
He came in the room, you know.
You'd speak up, please, ma'am.
He came in the room and speak that, you know, spoke like he always do.
Okay. And what did he tell you?
So are you noticing, first of all, she's speaking softer. The lawyer's got to say to her, speak up. And secondly, can you see how she's swallowing? And also, it's like she doesn't really want to talk about what she's about to say. Why do you think that is? Why do you think why do you think she doesn't want to say what she's about to say? I'm just going to pull it back a couple of seconds, and I want you to notice how the tension has immediately gone up. I'm just going to take it back a couple of seconds. And the lawyer is now basically saying, tell the story of this moment where you see Alex again, and what does he say to you?
Station, where were you? And I said, what was your job during that, or what were you doing during the visitation?
I was in the room with Miss Libby, just back and forth.
And sometime that afternoon, did you see Alex Murdaugh?
Yes.
Okay. Tell the jury about that, please.
He came in the room, you know.
You'd speak up, please, ma'am.
He came in the room and speak that, you know, spoke like he always do.
And what did he tell you?
So also take note of Alex Murdaugh in that bottom right corner. How do you think he's feeling at this moment about what? Remember, it's someone who's basically in their employ, right? I think she's worked for them for 2 years, right? And she's actually got a very important role to play in this whole story. And so what do you think he's feeling at this point where it's about to be what she's going to say? And take a look at all the people behind him. Let's just blow this up. All these people looking at her, some of them leaning forward, right? Because some people want to believe him. And I think one of them is the housekeeper as well. The housekeeper would like to keep her job and she'd like to believe that he's innocent, right? And so it's quite a simple question. What did he say to you that day?
That he was sitting at the house. He was at the house.
Say it again.
So have you noticed she's now actually choking back tears, right? I'll play that again in a second, but basically she's already crying. Now, why do you think she's crying? All that she said is that he said to her that he was at the house. Now, it's kind of in very general terms, but what she's actually saying is what Alex Murdaugh said to her was that I was at the house they're in at that point, his mother's house that day. So what? Of course he was there. But yeah, it's something more pertinent to that, right? And the other thing that's obviously pertinent is another housekeeper in their family has died. In terms of the housekeeper and his wife and child, that's 3 people. And if you add his father, that's 4 people, right? And now he has another housekeeper who's kind of in a situation where she is being told something and she's getting very emotional about it, and she's actually getting very scared about it, right? And can you see there's kind of a blue collar, white collar thing going on? She works for the Murdaughs, right? And she's a trusted employee, and she obviously wants to keep her job, and all she's got to do is say something. But is she going to say that? And notice again, I'm just going to play that part again, all she's saying is what he said to her was that he was at the house. But look how emotional she is.
And what did he tell you?
That he was sitting at the house. He was at the house.
Say it again.
He was at the house.
And I'm not 100% following you. He was telling you or saying to you that he was at the house? When?
The night of the murders.
The night of the murders.
Yes.
What was he telling you about that he was at the house the night of the murders?
That he'd been there 30 to 40 minutes.
Okay, so that's quite important to highlight, that what he told her was that he had been at the house for 30 to 40 minutes. So what happens is it's the first time she's seeing him in a couple of days, and then he returns to the house, and he says to her, I was at the house for 30 to 40 minutes. And she's suddenly very emotional about this. I just want to deal with a couple of comments. It's quite distracting, but let me deal with them. I think someone has said she's not a housekeeper. Okay, so she's someone who's in the house when with the mother of Alex Murdaugh, right? So let's not call her housekeeper. Let's call her a nurse, right? No, she's not a nurse. She's something else. She's someone who is in the employ of the Murdaughs, is kind of the point I'm trying to make. She's someone who can tell you about what is normal in terms of the behavior of the family. So what does he normally come there at that time of night? Like a housekeeper, she would know the answer to that. She's someone who looks after someone in a house situation. Is she the housekeeper? No, she's the nurse. Does she make tea or coffee? kind of thing. So let's first deal with that. What is the other thing? Dover and Dolly also made quite a good comment. Something about didn't the father died 3 days after. So the Maggie and Paul died on the 7th, and the patriarch of the whole family died. Okay, you're definitely too hot. Died 3 days later. Okay, so let's at least try and get into that. Caregiver. So let's all agree that we're dealing with a caregiver here. We're dealing with a caregiver, right? That's the right term. I think let's just kind of go completely out of it for a while, and let's deal with this this article. Alex Murdaugh was fidgety when he visited his mother, and there you have that right term, caregiver. It's not the housekeeper. Let's not get that term wrong. That's really the bottom line, right? That the alleged killer was at his home for 20 minutes, half as long as he claimed. I kind of wanted to take you through the nuances of her emotions. I kind of wanted to take you through all that, but you're right. It's not the housekeeper, it's the caregiver. So yeah, I kind of wanted to take you through just that whole thing where emotions sort of change, right? I must say I've kind of had a bit of a change of emotion as well. Anyway, let's go on to just how deep the rabbit hole goes. I sort of wanted to spend about half an hour dealing with today's trial date, but it's sort of like it's not the housekeeper. I must say the whole housekeeper thing in the Ramsey case just gives you so much more information, so much more insight. But yeah, it's not the housekeeper, it's the caregiver. So let's just sort of leave that whole thing alone and move on to the rabbit hole. So about a week ago, I went into this whole thing of how deep does the rabbit hole go. Curiosity killed the cat, and in true crime, curiosity and attention to detail and imagination can take you really a long way. So one might say in true crime, curiosity catches the cat, right? So kind of how it started for me was this article kind of pricked my spidey sense. I wasn't really paying that much attention to this case. And this article from Randolph Murdaugh III, and I just saw that date. Can you see the date there? June the 10th. And I just thought, wow, can that be right? Did he really die 3 days later? And, you know, it's like this really weird situation where one day he's at home, and then I think on the day that Paul and Maggie died, he is at hospital. I think he went to hospital that same day. And the other thing that was like really bizarre is he then came home and died at home, right? I'm just trying to think of the other thing that the caregiver. So basically, the caregiver is there dealing with the funeral of Randolph Murdaugh III. And that's when they have this sort of encounter, right? But this was really what got my spidey sense going, his death on June the 10th. And that's sort of what you hear her talking about. And so nothing about the contents of this article stood out to me except just June 10th. Wow, 3 short days after Murdaugh allegedly murdered his 52-year-old wife and 22-year-old son. And the other thing I wanted to kind of play for you was that thing where she talks about what Alex says to his mother and that she has no memory of him, right? I just got a little bit distracted by the whole, actually it's a caregiver kind of thing. But you kind of get the sense that his mother couldn't couldn't say anything because she wasn't even conscious. She was sort of asleep. And then she describes what happened, which is incredible testimony, what is actually going on, right? As I say, I wanted to spend a bit of time on that, but let's go down this rabbit hole a bit further. His father is supposed to be part of his alibi for the night, as I understand it. In terms of one of the early stories that I heard was that he went to visit his father in hospital, right? That was one of the early stories. And now it seems to be, well, that he just went to see his mother. So I don't know if you guys remember, it was said that he had an ironclad alibi, that Alex Murdaugh had an ironclad alibi, and that came across from his brothers, right? His brothers said that. And I think part of the brothers' narrative was that he went to his father. And then on the way back, he also saw his mother. That's how I understand it. So, so I just want to see if I've got the link here. His wayward son said he visited him in the hospital in Savannah that night. Do you have a link to that? See if I can. I think it's from this this article. Just want to see if I can find it so I can highlight it to you guys. This is the source. I'm just trying to find the exact point in this article where it refers to that. Am I going to find it? Anyway, let's just leave it over there. So what comes out of this article are these words. I'll just put that in chat. Okay, so that's somewhere in the article. It's just such a long article. I don't know exactly where it is. Father in the hospital. Okay, so yeah, it says Murdaugh's attorneys are yet to submit an alibi to the jury, but in November they filed papers with the court claiming he was visiting his elderly mother at the time of the murders. His Alzheimer's-stricken mother, 83, is now reported on her deathbed. So that addresses the other question. Someone said, is she still alive? As far as I know, his mother is still alive, but like on her deathbed, and has been since January, I think. I'm just trying to find that part about his father in hospital. I just can't seem to find it. Anyway, it's one of those things. So as I say, his alibi for the night was that he was visiting his ailing father in the hospital, and that's what I got from this article. And so you can see that there's been a change to that alibi. But think about it, whose idea was it to take his father out of the hospital if his condition was worsening? I kind of get the feeling I'm going to be criticized that's not true unless I can show that in this article. So maybe I must just spend a little bit more time finding it. It's just such a long article. In the hospital, where are those words? Gone through the whole article, still can't find it. Anyway, definitely it's not my day today. Anyway, so you can maybe just say that I've made that up then, I guess. So I thought that I found that from the article, and that's the article I quoted it from. So anyway, one of the stories was that Alex Murdaugh took his father to hospital on the night of the killings. That's what I'm trying to show to you guys, but yeah, I just can't find the thing. Murdaugh apparently checked in on his mother who has dementia before returning to the hunting property. That's from this article, right? So you can see there's a bit of a tailoring of his alibi over there. Where we are today, of course, neither Murdaugh's father or his mother can verify his alibi. That's kind of the bottom line. And what you really want to do when you kind of reviewing this sort of thing, right? Especially when you're reviewing the trial testimony, what you kind of want to do is, in retrospect, make a note of what the lawyer is trying to get to, right? And I kind of did make notes, which was what I was going to originally do in this, which is the point of the cross-examination is that his mother didn't know he was there. And then the other point of it is just a simple thing of establishing how long was he there, right? And you almost want those words almost like as a billboard. And then you have all the chatter that goes around demonstrating that. And I sometimes find that the, what do you call it? The legal argument to get to something is so laborious and so convoluted that if you're the jury listening to this, you sort of almost want to fall asleep. In fact, I actually did fall asleep listening to some of this testimony because you don't know what they're actually trying to say. Now, the lawyer knows what he's trying to say, but not everybody does. Not everyone realizes, okay, this is what you're trying to impress. And what I would do if I was a lawyer is I would have like almost a flipboard, and I would write down this is the bullet point that we're trying to establish, prove, acknowledge, and then when the testimony touches on that, then you kind of make it tick, but for everybody to see, and then you go on to the next page and go to the next bullet point, just to make it explicit what you're trying to say, right? So so that's kind of where we are today, that neither Murdaugh's father or his mother can verify his alibi. And so where does it really come down to? Well, I almost said housekeeper. The caretaker, right? The caregiver. Caretaker is also the wrong word. Oh no, the wrong word. But the details do matter in true crime. So the caregiver is extremely important in terms of his alibi, and his alibi kind of seems to be, I spent a long time at my mother, and I guess longer than I was actually at home. That seems to kind of be his alibi, doesn't it? Okay. So for someone who asked this question about how is his mother, where is she now? We're not 100% sure, but as of January, she's been on her deathbed, right? So that's from this particular article. So just in terms of the alibi aspect, we already have like a rabbit hole, and it goes even further than when we look at what Murdaugh's brothers, John and Randy, have said, right? And they said this about the night of June 10th, that that Alex Murdaugh has a supposedly ironclad alibi, right? Can you see that? So here we're saying we're just regular people, and then John, Marvin, and Randy Murdaugh, they appeared on Good Morning America, and they said on the day Maggie and Paul were murdered, Alex had taken their father to the hospital. That's kind of the thing I really wanted to show you, right? So that it's not you saying it or you plucking it out of thin air. There you actually have it. His brothers, and as far as I know, Alex Murdaugh is like the middle child. Am I wrong about that? I don't know. Is he the not the middle child? As far as I know, I think Randy's the eldest and John's younger than him. But my impression is that he's the middle child. And so you kind of have them going on television to say, his brothers, to say, but the part that I want to emphasize is that they go to the hospital. Alex took their father to the hospital on the day of the killings, right? And can you see how the alibi is now not that? I mean, you have him going to his mother, and that's really it. Now, it could be that his father went to the hospital on the day of the killings, but not at the time of the killings, right? And anyway, it says after that, he reportedly checked in on his mother before returning to the hunting property. And so can you see how that has kind of created a rabbit hole, right? Okay. So we are dealing with a Laurie Vallow scenario here, aren't we? Remember the whole doomsday mom thing, but instead of a backdrop of radical end times Mormonism, instead of religion, there's a backdrop of Southern law and steroids. But not just any Southern law and not just any steroids. This is the greatest legacy of legal service by any one family in the history of America. In other words, in a purely legal sense, these people have power and they know it. I mean, how do you prosecute a case involving your super powerful family when the prosecutors are from your own law firm? And that's when you sort of go into that, you go into the, what do you call it? The obituary, and you see that sticking out at you. For 87 consecutive years, 3 generations of the Murdaugh family served as solicitor of the 14th court. It's the longest service in one office by the same family in the history of America. So there's what this is obviously telling you is there's a lot of privilege going on here, a lot of prestige and all that kind of thing. And so if you really want to get inside this rabbit hole, you know where to start, don't you? The timeline. And the Greenville News has done a phenomenal job in compiling one. I must say this live has definitely not turned out the way I thought it would. I thought did I not subscribe to this? So I'm not going to be able to show that either. Okay. Okay. Anyway, so this was the original headline that I wanted to show you. It's from the Greenville News. There you have those words: power, prestige, and privilege inside the rise and fall of the Murdaugh dynasty. Right? 4 death investigations loom over the Murdaugh family. And I sort of wonder, is the way that Randolph died, is that not suspicious either? Did he just happen to die then? It just makes you kind of wonder. Also makes you wonder the circumstances of the housekeeper's death, the original housekeeper. What happened there? And if something did happen, did Paul and Maggie know about that? That's definitely quite mysterious. Also, did she trip over the dog or fall down the stairs? Because those are 2 different stories. So alongside each milestone and each date in terms of the timeline is another rabbit hole. So I started off going backwards from the date of Murdaugh's father's death, and there is something to see going backwards. 3 Murdaugh family members die in as many days, but mysterious deaths go all the way back to July 2015. That's like 8 years ago. So we also need to look at the rabbit holes beyond Murdaugh's father's death. And so let's do that in chronological order. And this timeline has been compiled. So this timeline I'm going to show you now is compiled courtesy of Randy Sparkman of the USA Today News Network, right? Comes from, and it was published in the Greenville News, right? So this is really where we get an idea of what we're talking about. So if I can just sort of summarize what I've just said is, when I was just doing casual reading on this case, and I saw that the Patriarch had died 3 days later, that took me going backwards through the timeline and eventually go all the way back to 2015. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go from 2015 through the timeline, through the milestones of the timeline to the present. And that's going to show us how deep this rabbit hole is going. Okay. And so this is quite surprising. It all starts with, or seems to start with, Stephen Smith, who's a gay student. And he was found, I'm going to reduce myself here so you can see that. He was walking to his home near Crocketville when he was killed. And there's a lot of controversy here between, was he hit by a car or was he killed in some other way? What they did report initially was that it was a hit and run on Sandy Run Road. But then they also said, but there was no evidence that he was struck by a vehicle. So there's mystery around that. What this doesn't mention is that this young kid was gay and ... So what does that mean? It's hard to say. So if someone got away with Stephen Smith's murder less than 3 years later, maybe they were at it again, right? And that brings us to February 26, 2018. The Murdaugh housekeeper dies. Not the, she wasn't the caregiver, she's the housekeeper. Let's be clear on that. Gloria Satterfield was the housekeeper for 20 years, I think. And she died here, they say, after an apparent trip and fall incident at the Murdaugh home. The death was ruled natural and no autopsy was performed. Well, only for them to decide later on, we're going to exhume her body. As far as I understand, she had a cut on the top of her head, or she hurt herself on the top of her head. I don't know whether that is a natural place to hurt your head if you fall. I would imagine a more natural place to hurt your head is the back of your head and the bottom of your head. I think it's quite, unless you fall almost like in a Superman pose, but it's very hard to hurt the top of your head falling downstairs. And so if that isn't what happened, then what did happen? Does make one wonder. This definitely does make one wonder. And so they did have her exhumed. And I think an autopsy was performed, but I haven't been able to find the results of that autopsy. So I'm not sure what that is, and I don't know whether that's going to come out at trial. So then almost a year to the day, so this happened February 26th, almost a year to the day later, February 24, 2019. This boat crash happened. And I think that was covered today in trial, right? And it's also the subject of the poll that I put up And make sure if you vote if you haven't already. Let's just have a look. The last time I checked, I think you guys were saying,
Are you sick of having issues with your?
are you sick of having issues? Yeah. 60% say probably if that boat incident never took place, Maggie and Paul would still be alive. I think another way of thinking about it is, if you take that away, does the greed aspect go away? And I think although it's possible that you may not have had murders, you may probably have had those financial crimes anyway. Would those financial crimes have led to murder? Well, that's quite hard to say. So I don't know whether I wouldn't say that it may have happened sooner or later. Okay, and so there's a year that passes where nothing much seems to happen. After this boat incident, a year goes by, nothing much seems to happen, and then there are no milestones in the timeline, but there ought to be, because what's happening is one after another legal person, in terms of this case, are recusing themselves, which delays the inevitable. If another way of thinking about this is, if what was supposed to happen here simply did happen, if there was a wrongful death and whatever it is, if that could simply have come to a head, then it would have been sorted out in some way or another, and then you would have had a kind of a sense of relief, a kind of a sense of release. You know what I mean? You would have had kind of a sense of the tension that's building up gets sort of dealt with. And because that didn't happen, instead you kind of have it bottling up, and you now have criminal psychology potentially brewing, right? And it's that whole thing of living a lie and trying to get away with something, all of that is starting to sort of percolate. And then if you do get away with that, you try and get away with something else. If you do get away with taking the housekeeper's insurance, you try and get away with something else, right? And it's a video I meant to do. I wanted to do a video about the housekeeper's son, and if you almost imagine you are the criminal, and you look at the housekeeper's son and you think, isn't there? Couldn't I maybe pull the wool over this kid's eyes? Couldn't I maybe manipulate him and steal the money? Wasn't that what somebody was thinking in that particular case? And then does that then lead this whole idea of you think you're so much cleverer than everyone else. You think you're so much better than everyone else. You think you can play sort of games with other people's lives and make a lot of money out of it. Isn't that how it starts? You're literally turning people's lives or deaths into money. And you are so clever, and because you're so powerful, you can get away with it. And I'm going to say Murdaugh reminds me a bit of Jason Roeder, a South African businessman who was convicted of killing his wife in a hotel room where he was having a big corporate thing. He was the CEO. He was having a big corporate event at a wine estate, all his employees over there. And you kind of got the feeling that, didn't he think that he could get away with it? Because he basically said, no, his wife just committed suicide. But at the same time, one of his other employees was supposedly a mistress of his. So you kind of got the idea that this really rich guy thought that maybe he can get away with this crime because everyone worked for him, so no one was going to cross him because they would lose their job and whatnot. And you kind of get the same impression here, but on a much grander scale, right? So 2 years later, as if to make up for the downtick in dead bodies, you had this double homicide. So this double homicide happened 2 years after the boat incident. And the thing that I find quite astonishing is Murdaugh himself, part of Murdaugh's story, part of Murdaugh's version is that this crime happened because of the boat incident. And so it's quite interesting that he links it directly to that. of course, he's a prime suspect, but he links it directly to that. It does make you wonder, in his own mind, in his own heart, isn't it in a way linked to that in any event, right? And then suddenly, after this, the timeline picks up. 3 days later, the patriarch dies. And again, what I find suspicious about it is he was at home and he wasn't well. He had a long illness. And then he goes to the hospital, right? He goes to the hospital, but then he dies back at home. He doesn't die in the hospital, he dies back home. What's that all about? Is there something suspicious going on there? Because what's quite strange is that just before the father dies, the mother dies, the son dies, and then obviously there's a big power shift where people inherit things and all sorts of other things take place. And in other words, the father dies before, I guess, inheritances could be changed because what have you been doing in terms of the firm? Have you been abusing your position? And if that is then established, then would you then not be disinherited? Because what happened immediately after this was Murdaugh was shortly about to quit the family business or quit this prestigious law firm. So if his father had lived and his father had seen what is about to take place now, what would he have done, right? So literally, what is it? 15 days after Murdaugh III's death, the first mysterious death in the story is back in the headlines, right? That's again from this timeline, June 23rd, 2021, right? So if you think about it, June 7 is when the double homicide takes place. 3 days later, the father dies. I would say under somewhat mysterious circumstances. I mean, his father's even in a way part of the alibi in the beginning, and then not. And then yeah, what you could say? What is it? A couple of days later, barely a week later, they open an investigation into Stephen Smith's death. South Carolina Law Enforcement Division announced that they've opened an investigation into the death of Stephen Smith based on information gathered during the course of the double murder investigation. And I must say, you do sort of wonder if Stephen Smith is part of this whole thing. How is it part of it? Okay, so I couldn't help thinking, did Alex Murdaugh feel that he was living in his father's shadow because he's the middle child? And did he also feel like he wants to come out of that shadow also if his shadowy dealings are exposed, then all of the privilege that he's been used to might be denied to him. And so was this almost like a coming of age, like I need to take control of my destiny. And in order to do that, maybe certain people need to be out of the way sooner than later. Like if you think about the whole idea of family legacies, it's like, well, it's my turn now. Now I take the reins of power. And maybe sometimes you're in a rush for that. You sort of feel like, if you think about just this idea of being greedy, if you think about, well, I want money that I haven't earned now, sort of ill-gotten gains. You're sort of in a rush to get something that you don't quite deserve. Now, couldn't the same apply to something like an inheritance or your place in prestige in a law firm. Because I mean, as soon as your father's not there anymore, then you rise up a tier in a way, right? So in a way, he wants to come out of his father's shadow. So just 15 days after Murdaugh III's death, the first mysterious death in the story is back in the headlines. And this investigation is as a result of the investigation into Paul and Maggie's murders. It's not like it just happened. It's not like they just started thinking about Stephen Smith again. It was as a result of this double homicide that they thought, we need to look into Stephen Smith again. And then that leads to something else. So in September, so much happened. So this was late June, then July goes by, August goes by, and then very early in September, Alex Murdaugh resigns from a law firm, from this law firm that he's working for. Now, if you think about it, wasn't the death of his father perhaps supposed to prevent exactly this from happening? In other words, if his father hadn't died, wouldn't Alex Murdaugh have been kicked out of the law firm because of what his father may have said, right? Possibly, I don't know. So it says Alex Murdaugh resigns from his position at Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Alsroth, and Detrick, PMPED, and is accused by the law firm of misappropriating funds. If his father hadn't died, would his father, and his father was in good health, would his father actually have kicked him out of this firm? And that's besides the double homicide, besides that. And then the very next day, Alex Murdaugh was apparently shot. So you can see how things are gathering momentum. Very next day, Alex Murdaugh is shot in what police say was a failed scheme in which a former client of Murdaugh's shot the lawyer in an attempt to have Murdaugh's son benefit from a $10 million life insurance payout. And this is where it gets really like mind fuckery. It gets really hard to figure out. The fact that Buster was supposed to benefit from his father's death, was that a way of getting Buster onto Dad's side? Like, I wanted you to get 10 million. I was going to die and kind of give you 10 million. Was that a way of almost buying Buster's loyalty or Buster's favor? It's almost an inversion of his own father dying and he's waiting to get the power, right? Because maybe his father was holding on to the power or whatever. Well, was Alex Murdaugh, was that really a botched suicide? In other words, did he genuinely want to commit suicide, or was he pretending for it to be a botched suicide? In other words, was this a big manipulative gaslighting thing to send a message to Buster? This is how much you mean to me, and I actually wanted you to have all of this money, right? And in other words, was this all a ploy to get Buster onto his side? And then you've also got to wonder, the death of Stephen Smith, who is that related to, if anyone? Is it related to Maggie? Doesn't seem likely. Is it related to Paul? Is it related to Buster? If Stephen Smith was gay, ... right? That's kind of the situation. Okay. And then 3 days after this, 3 days after Alex Murdaugh was shot, he goes into drug rehab, right? And I think I put a couple, I'm not sure if it's on here, but anyway, there are a couple of articles, actually I think I tweeted it, where Alex Murdaugh seemed to be dabbling in opioids, not only that he was addicted to them, but also that he was dealing in them, that he was trafficking in opioids, right? And so one does wonder, how does this whole toxic mixture go together? Privilege, drug addiction, entitlement, greed, and all that. How does it actually work together? And what I think is the big test of this trial is whether the prosecution have figured that out. Have they figured out how in a way that resonates, how all of these dynamics, because it's very complicated in practice, how they sort of work together in that whole criminal psychology machine, right? Okay, so when he entered rehab, it says, the murders of my wife and son have caused an incredibly difficult time in my life. I've made a lot of decisions I truly regret. I'm resigning from my law firm and entering rehab after a long battle that has been exacerbated by these murders. So what he's acknowledging here is that he was battling before the murders, but he seems to be suggesting that the murders made him a bit of a drug addict. I'm immensely sorry to everyone I've hurt, including my family, friends, and colleagues. I ask for prayers as I rehabilitate myself and my relationship. So it's almost like he's saying, I'm going to rehab. That's my sin. That's the thing that I've done wrong. What about all the financial stuff? What about the housekeeper? And I think that's coming up. When does that come up? Oh, it's about to come up. So he enters rehab. 2 days after that, Alex Murdaugh's legal legacy is all over. And it does make you wonder, was his legal legacy in jeopardy before his father died? Like, did he feel like if dad finds out, I'm going to not inherit? And did he find out that, or did he suspect that, I think I would end it over there. Anyway, so the end result is that he loses his legal license, and that's why he's often described as the disgraced attorney, right? He's not an attorney anymore. So on September 8th, so much happened just since June of 2021, between the murders and September, so much happened. They published an order saying that they've suspended his law license following allegations by the PMPED firm. Sharon Tuck, have you become a new member? Run the World says all the money he inherited will go to legal fees. I think it's possible that Buster might get a certain amount, but we'll see. Bob, you may not say housekeeper, you must say caregiver. It's really important. Thanks, Sharon. Welcome. Okay. So he has his legal license suspended, but his fall is still not over. 5 days later, this happens. Police investigate money missing from the law firm. Right? So what's been going on is he's actually been using his father's law firm, it appears, as a cash machine. So, for example, and we're going to get to that in a moment, for example, the housekeeper falls down. Oh, don't worry, I'll help you sort all of this out. That's what he says to the son. Don't worry, I'll use my position and I will help you get compensation for your mother's accident. And then ultimately, he never gets anything. In fact, I think the housekeeper's son didn't get a dime, and I think he promised the son $100,000 or something, when he apparently pocketed, it's alleged that he pocketed over 4 million, right? And he promised the son $100,000, and I don't think he ultimately gave him a cent, as I understand it. So the very next day, after September 13, we find out it's not just blood on someone's hands, right? This case is not just a case of blood on someone's hands, it's also money, insurance fraud, faking his own death, and shady dudes doing dodgy things. And so this guy comes up, Curtis Smith, arrested in an alleged insurance fraud scheme, right? And if you think about it, it's kind of like this is almost if you think of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, this is almost the what do you call it? The Mr. Hyde version, in a way, of Alex Murdaugh, in the sense that he presents as this wealthy, respectable, one of the most amazing legal families in America. Well, that's Dr. Jekyll, but there's this other side to him. And this friendship, this association he has with Curtis Smith shows almost like the Mr. Hyde version of that character, doesn't it? And so the very next day after Curtis Smith is arrested, the authorities remember the housekeeper who mysteriously died and whose family less mysteriously couldn't sue the Murdaugh family for compensation. And it does make you wonder, where did everything start? Did it start with Stephen Smith? Was Stephen Smith accidentally run over? If he wasn't accidentally run over, what was that all about? The housekeeper, did she trip over her own feet? Or did somebody do something wrong and it was sort of an accident? But you do kind of get the sense that if the housekeeper was, if it wasn't an accident, then somehow Paul and Maggie perhaps knew something that they weren't supposed to know, right? Not only in terms of how she died, but also the end result of that. Yeah. Cheryl says, listen to the jailhouse call to Buster. Have you heard the call made to the 911 call made that Maggie and Paul, you hear both of their voices? Have you guys heard that? Yeah, that's right. But have you heard their 911 call? So that is being kind of rumored that there is, I guess the question that's sort of being asked is Buster gay? Anyway, so September 2021 was a busy month in the Murdaugh family, but we're not done yet. On September 16, Murdaugh was arrested for the first time. What seemed like it could never happen happens. So, in a weird way, I think you've got to look at the events of June. You've got to look at June 7, June 10th, June 23rd, I think, somewhere around there. All of those things happen. And then a couple of months later, Alex Murdaugh is finally arrested. Wasn't that to prevent this from taking place? Weren't all of those things meant to prevent this from taking place? In other words, wasn't Maggie and Paul, didn't they die in order to prevent this from taking place? Did Alex's father die to prevent this from taking place? Did because and then instead of that happening, their deaths lead to, well, let's think about Stephen Smith. Let's think about this housekeeper. Let's actually pay attention to Alex Murdaugh. And then a month later, he's arrested again. So in a little bit more than a month, I think it's 2 months later, is arrested again. And the second arrest is to do with possibly stealing the insurance proceeds from the death of his housekeeper, right? So that's an arrest for that. He is denied bond on 2 felony counts of obtaining property by false pretense to undergo, in order to undergo psychiatric evaluation before bond can be reconsidered. And I think those words say it all, false pretense. What I wanted to show you, like I kind of had this idea for how to do this live, and how I kind of wanted to open it was showing the not housekeeper, the caregiver, saying her thing and just becoming more and more emotional. But what's quite easy to lose track of when you're looking at that is Murdaugh himself, his expression, and you kind of see him rub his cheek at a certain point. What I find really crazy about this particular case is Murdaugh's range of emotion. You can go from being absolutely overcome with emotion, like bobbing. He seems to do like a self-soothing thing where he's so emotional that he kind of bobs, and it seems like he's just very and snot comes out of his nose, and he just seems like he's incredibly emotional. And then the next thing, he can be like, he seems to be sort of joking with his lawyers, or it just seems like he can be very lighthearted as well. And then right next to that, he can seem to be very like emotionless. He can seem to like give like a cold stare, and he seems to be kind of clinical in that sense. But that range is just incredible. It's just incredible how unemotional he can be, and then how incredibly emotional he can be. And so it does seem like false pretense, doesn't it? And that whole idea of false pretense, when you think about, I did a video right in the beginning, 10 red flags in 7 minutes. It's actually 10 red flags in about 5 minutes, where he breaks down and is crying in the vehicle, and then the next thing, he just is matter of fact. It's almost like he's forgotten why they're there, and he takes them through all of these things. And I think it's in it's either in clip 2 or 3 where he just starts naming Paul's friends, and he does it in such a matter of fact way. You sort of think, but a moment ago you were totally broken down crying. Have you forgotten why you're there, right? And so once again, you kind of have that Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde thing. And I do think you've got to think about drugs like, I think all of us are capable of having different sides to ourselves. I think all of us are capable of having a lighter side and a darker side. But when it's really extreme, when it's extreme, when it's Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde extreme, then I think you've got to think about drugs being part of that equation. Anyway, so 2 weeks after he was arrested again, the cops wanted to make sure they have Murdaugh's money frozen in place. And so they had his assets frozen. Okay. And then 2 weeks after that, Murdaugh faced 27 additional criminal charges. That's November 19, 2021. 2 weeks later, 21 additional charges. Now, I don't know if you guys have watched Gladiator. There's this scene where Commodus says, "You've been a busy little bee." You kind of get the idea that this is not like one thing that Murdaugh seems to have done, or one or two things that he's done. It just seems to be like a whole labyrinth. It's like constant things that have been taking place. And that's why I say it looks like we're dealing with a huge amount of greed. It's a huge amount of greed. Murdaugh seems to have been, as I say, a very busy fellow, but 6 months after Maggie and Paul's death, still no murder charges have been filed. So December 13, 2021, $7 million bond was set for Alex Murdaugh. I just want to bring up another image. Okay. So by the end of the year, so 2021 was this incredible year, basically the downfall, the spectacular downfall of this. And it's quite weird how it's all about Alex Murdaugh. You don't really hear that much about his brothers. And it makes you kind of wonder, is that also a clue here? Is he someone who's being in the shadows, and he's doesn't really like being, he wants to be the number one guy? Is that kind of part of what's going on here? So by the end of the year, the law firm that once had the name Murdaugh as part of its name, that prestige is completely gone, which leads to them renaming themselves. But don't John and Randy still work there? Missing from this timeline is the climax, right? So this timeline, a brilliant timeline from the Greenville News, but what's missing from it is, well, what happened after this? So 7 long months passed before the authorities finally felt ready to charge Alex with double murder, right? So what I'm trying to say is, where this timeline stops in December, it's a really long time. It's not like it's 7 months after the murders. It's 7 plus 6 months at least. So around about a year and a month after the murders, they finally press charges. And don't you get a sense that the authorities are terrified of, almost like with Alec Baldwin, the authorities are terrified of doing what they sort of feel like they must do. And so they are trying to make absolutely certain what they have, because it's not a they don't necessarily have a smoking gun, so they kind of want to get all the information that they can, so that they've taken a lot of time to do that. You've got things like, is that a tarp or is it a raincoat? And I think sorry, it's not housekeeper. I think the caregiver said tart. I think she described this blue material that she saw being carried. I think she actually described it as a tart. Funnily enough. Irene says he thinks he's a great actor. Irene, you're up late, 3 o'clock in the morning. So 7 long months pass after, at this point, he's got $7 million bond. Also, his assets have been frozen, and then he's finally charged with double murder on July 14, 2022. That's last year. That's a year, a month, and 4 days after his wife and son's murders. And what I want to do is put that into perspective with the Idaho case, right? It took a year, it took 13 months, 4 days for Murdaugh to be charged. It took Brian Kohberger 47 days, so less than 2 months. And people were saying, is this master is such an incredible criminal that he might be a serial killer. This guy's a criminal genius, which I've been trying to be a bit sarcastic about. If you compare it, it took less than 2 months to catch Kohberger and charge him, whereas it took 13 months to charge Murdaugh. And obviously it's a little bit different because they already had him in custody and they already had him under their control based on these other things that they were holding him for. Someone describes him as an evil Richie Rich. Yeah. I also used to read Richie Rich comics. I must say he does look like Richie Rich with the whole red hair thing. Richie Rich had red hair in the comics, right? Buster's got red hair. It definitely is a good description. So then 6 months after that, 6 months after charging him, Murdaugh is on trial for murder. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. If we go beyond the USA Today timeline, let's hop onto the NBC News timeline. And let's deal with January 2022 to the present. That's from this article. I'll put a link in the chat to that if you're interested. So now we're going to deal with January 2022 till the present. So on January 21, 2022, shall I make myself a bit smaller? A grand jury indicts Murdaugh on 23 new charges, including breach of trust with fraudulent intent and computer crimes. Collectively, he faces 71 charges involving the theft of about $8.5 million over the course of 11 years. Now, it's easy to read that and just go, oh, 23 new charges, 8.5 million. No, you're talking about a very extensive level of criminality. This is someone who's gotten taken over by criminal impulses. You steal one thing, then you steal another thing, and then you're just stealing constantly, right? Think about those ideas. Think about the charges, but as ideas. Think about those words, breach of trust. Think about the breach of trust that is involved in blowing your son's head off behind his back. Think about the breach of trust in picking up a automatic rifle and shooting your wife, also from the back, because both of them were found dead, lying face down. Think about the breach of trust in terms of the housekeeper, which predated that. And no, don't worry, we're going to make sure you get what's coming to you. We'll get you your insurance payout or whatever. Think about that as a breach of trust as well. Think about fraudulent intent. And if you've got all these little lies that start building up, little lies beget bigger lies. Little crimes beget bigger crimes. And eventually, can the crimes get any bigger than they eventually are, right? You know what I'm saying? Can the crime get any bigger than it eventually becomes? And that's why I say, if you've got someone suspected here of killing his wife and son, is it really such a big leap to suggest that could he have done something to his own father? is actually seems to be using both his parents as an alibi. He's using them, and I mean, his mother couldn't even remember him being there. According to the caregiver, his mother didn't even know that he was there because she was sleeping, and didn't have very good memory anyway. So look at that, 71 charges, $8.5 million, 11 years. This has been going on for 11 years. And so what does that tell you? It tells you, well, if you can get away with something for 1 year and another year and another year, then don't you think that you can fool everybody all the time? And I think you can ask the same question about Koberger. How had Koberger gotten away with something and fooled people? Isn't the answer when he was a heroin addict? He'd learned then that he could tell people things, and then that was his story. Yeah, for over a decade. That's one way of putting it. So January 24th, a legal claim is filed against the estates of Margaret and Paul Murdaugh by the mother of Mallory Beach, and she was killed in a boat crash in 2019. The boat was owned by Murdaugh, and investigators have said Paul had been steering at some point during the night, and he had underage drinking. Wolfie says this case is more interesting than I thought it would be at first. Well, thanks a lot, Wolfie. I must say the timeline definitely shows the level of intrigue, definitely. Thanks a lot for that. So the fact that the boat was owned by Murdaugh and Paul was steering it and he was drinking and he was underage, and then there were 6 people on board, that then led to sort of a legal problem for the Murdaugh family. The boat slammed into a piling below a bridge and the passengers were ejected and one of them died. Now, I must say, I thought this legal claim was filed prior to this, right? I thought this legal claim was filed before January 24, 2022. I wouldn't have been surprised if it was January 24, 2021. But obviously, there was probably some kind of negotiation with the Murdaugh family, I presume. And in the same way, there was like behind the scenes negotiation with, and sort of, behind the scenes chatter with the housekeeper's son. There's what is officially going on and then what is unofficially going on. Don't you get that sense? Then it says here, 2 survivors also joined the Beach family's legal claim in an attempt to get money they believe they are owed as a result of the accident. Other related lawsuits are pending. In March and May, the sheer extent of Murdaugh's financial crimes appeared to become more evident. Now, not to put too fine a point on it, there's kind of a broad overlap, and I get that it's a very rough analogy, but Alec Baldwin was also embroiled in lots of lawsuits and he was kind of in legal difficulty. Nothing like this, but you kind of had legal things going on in the background, and then Helena Hutchins was killed. And all I'm trying to say is sometimes you can have a situation where, how can I put it? I'm not sure how to put it. I think you know what I'm kind of getting at, where you kind of feel like an accident is waiting to happen, perhaps because your attitude to the plights of others, instead of being sensitive, is particularly insensitive. Is that fair to say, or is that unkind? Anne says, if he doesn't stay in jail for life for all his crimes, I want a refund. Yeah, well, I think the prosecution so far have got quite a good case, but who knows? Who knows? Okay, so January 16, a grand jury indicts Murdaugh on 4 new charges related to a scheme to defraud multiple insurance companies and others involving his friend and another attorney, Corey Fleming. Fleming's lawyer says that he's yet another casualty of the host of crimes perpetrated by Alex Murdaugh. So if you say, I cannot believe Murdaugh betrayed his wife. I cannot believe Murdaugh betrayed his son. It should actually start with the housekeeper. I can't believe that Murdaugh betrayed the housekeeper's family. Okay. Well, I can't believe that he betrayed his son. I can't believe that he betrayed his wife. Well, he even apparently betrayed his best friend, right? You kind of get the feeling that he's lying to everybody, and isn't that often what drug addicts do? They do what they want, they get instant gratification, while meanwhile lying to literally everybody. And they put themselves above everybody else, right? And then May 4th, based on this NBC timeline, prosecutors announced that Murdaugh is facing 4 new charges relating to financial crimes, also involving Fleming and others. And it ends up being, you sort of read about it, there's 7 new charges, 4 new charges, whatever, and it ends up being over 100 separate charges. And it's almost like because there's so many charges, you just kind of get confused. But in a general sense, you're talking about someone who seems to be very manipulative, right? And then you come back to the caregiver and you think, was there some way that he tried to manipulate her? Is there some way that he tends to manipulate everyone around him? And then how does he do that? What does he use as a way to push someone to support him, right? In what way does he exert power that those around him do what he says? Well, isn't it just the whole thing of his reputation and the whole idea that that they're lawyers and you don't mess with them, right? You don't rock the boat. Sweet and Salty says he didn't fall from grace, he dove. Anne says, I don't believe any of Paul's friends. They are scared. They're afraid of Alex. Do you believe the cousin that provided the weapons to Alex Murdaugh? Like, do you think that he's beholden to Alex Murdaugh or not? Okay, so there seems to be no end to the deception. So where does the crime scene tape actually stop? And we asked the same question with the Laurie Vallow case. Like, where do you actually stop extending the crime scene tape? You can't extend it around the whole of planet Earth, but around which states and around which houses and properties. So if the breadcrumbs and paper trail have led anywhere, by June 3rd, barely a year after the double homicides, the cops applied for permission to exhume the deceased housekeeper's body, right? So it's almost a year after the double homicides that the police decide we actually need to dig up the housekeeper's body. Now, again, can you imagine what the caregiver must be thinking when she's thinking, I love this family. They've given me a great job. It's a nice home that I can watch television and whatever. And I just, do I believe that somebody did something wrong? I really hope they didn't, because I'd like to keep my job. But then, did that person do something wrong? And what does your heart tell you? What does your gut tell you? And was it Tracy Wallman, or Tracy Walder, from I think she gave an interview on News Nation just saying women have a very good intuitive sense about people sometimes. And I think this woman, this caregiver, had a sudden intuitive sense when he said, I wasn't here for 20 minutes, I was here for 40 minutes. Well, he didn't say that. He said, I was here for 40 minutes. And that troubled her enough to call her brother. Well, it troubled her enough where even when she was on the stand, she started crying, because it was like, I think those tears are because I suspect the worst, and that's not good for me. It's not good for anyone, but it's not good for me either, right? Irene says, I wonder if the housekeeper did have an autopsy. Well, that's why they exhumed her body. And that's information that hasn't come out yet. You'd imagine that her body was exhumed for the purpose of having an autopsy, right? So anyway, let's have a look at this. So June 3rd, 2022, they exhumed the housekeeper's body. And I think this is 4.5 years after she died, right? She died in February 2018. So about 4.5 years later. And they say her death couldn't be ruled natural. And why do you think her death is stated as natural? Who do you think put her death as natural? Who decided that her death would be notated as natural? And anyway, the coroner said that's inconsistent with injuries sustained in a trip and fall accident. Now, if you listen to the 911 call, you hear that they say that blood was coming out of her left ear, I believe, and she had an injury on the top of her head. And what else? She was basically lying on the ground. And I think Alex Murdaugh's story was that she'd fallen over the dog, over the family dog, whereas Maggie and Paul said she fell down 8 stairs. I don't know, is 8 stairs enough where you'd fall and die? But the other part of it that's strange is she survived. She wasn't able to talk, but she survived for a while and then died. But she wasn't able to say what had happened to her. Okay, let's go on to the next one. So in June, the C and D words are back, front and center to Murdaugh's case, conspiracy and drugs. So Curtis Smith is taken into custody on new charges, including 4 counts of money laundering, 3 counts of forgery, and criminal conspiracy. So it looks like Murdaugh would give a lot of money to Smith, according to these charges, and then he would launder the money. He would sort of put them into some sort of scheme that would clean the money, turn dirty money into clean money. The interesting thing with this whole thing of laundering is what's come out now is that the person who, I think it's a law enforcement person, who got the clothing from related to the crime scene, said that she could tell it was freshly laundered, right? Remember I said weeks ago, is there any evidence of somebody doing laundry in the middle of this crime, right? And that's a very underestimated thing in true crime, doing laundry in the middle of the crime. Let me see if I can quickly dip into that aspect. Uh, I think it was on Fox News, but the one thing I don't see is from Fox News. I think it's this article. Bring it back up. I think it's this article. Murder trial. He brought top to mother's home. So she thinks it's a top. So can you see over there? Former sled technician describes Murdaugh's shirt as freshly laundered. And her name's Jamie Hall. Let me bring that up a bit. Jamie Hall prepared evidence for gun residue analysis, and she described Alex Murdaugh's shirt as freshly laundered in her notes. Alex's green cargo shorts, tennis shoes, and white Hanes t-shirt were collected after that. It smelled freshly laundered, which is not typical of the clothing in the lab. She also noted small reddish-brown stains on the t-shirt. That's actually not what I would want to be looking at. I would want to be looking at the clothing that you see in the original footage of them planting the trees. I think he's kind of got like a greenish shirt and long khaki trousers. I would love to know what happened to that clothing. Anyway, so if we go back to this part of the timeline, June 28, 2022, were you guys able to see the article? Were you guys able to see this article? Did you guys see that? I'm not sure if I missed it. Can't find these clothes, the dress shirt and pants, yeah. So where is that clothing? Okay. Just trying to find my spot. I think it's this one. June 28, 2022, a grand jury indicts Murdaugh and Smith with criminal conspiracy and narcotics offenses. So you kind of got to ask yourself, what role did drugs play in the story? And we know it's a story that goes back 11 years. Were drugs part of the process of a mind being addled, a heart being addled? Now, if you just think about it, what is unusual about this family and about this story? Privilege, wealth, and I suppose you could add to that being spoiled. And what is the cliche almost with very, very rich families, right? It's an absolute cliche that it's like you can talk about the poor little rich girl, also the poor little rich boy. The poor little rich boy is the middle child, and almost like the book by Harry, Spare. Doesn't Murdaugh feel a bit spare in his family? He doesn't want to be the prince second in line to the throne. And he doesn't want to be spare for his whole life, right? He doesn't want to be like Prince Charles, like the runner-up his entire life. And so is he like a poor little rich boy that feels sorry for himself or whatever, or is very self-indulgent and then indulges in certain money aspects, and then doesn't he also indulge in drugs, right? And if you think about the the drug narrative and the financial corruption. I think in the same way that drugs can corrupt you in the sense that you're no longer necessarily a sincere person, you no longer necessarily experience the world in an authentic way. It's all through a veneer of chemicals. In the same way, money has a different value compared to people. And so when you mix those two together, money and drugs, then do people just recede in the distance? And isn't that what happened here? That people receded further and further into the distance. Money and drugs became more and more important, and eventually goes into rehab. He loses everything. He loses his job, his prestige, his family, his reputation. And what's the center of that story? Smith is also indicted on other drugs charges. The men are accused of conspiring to purchase and distribute oxycodone in Colleton County from October 7, 2013 to September 7, 2021. How long is that? That's 8 years. So that's 8 years that Murdaugh was, according to these charges, conspiring with a crook to do things with drugs. So we know that his criminal archive goes back 11 years. So at least 8 of those years that we know of were drug related, and now we've got confirmation of that. It's probable that it went back even further than that, right? Zenaida says, I can see that. Okay. It is like a snowball going down a hill. Okay. 13 months after Maggie and Paul's murders, the charges against her husband and his father are up to 84. He's also facing 11 different lawsuits. 11 lawsuits. That's quite a lot to a lot of shit that someone seems to have gotten up to, doesn't it? So 13 July 2022, as per NBC's headline, the South Carolina Supreme Court formally disbars Murdaugh. So about a year earlier, thanks a lot, Liesel. Yeah, that is true. Drugs, arrogance, denial, and power. Yeah, that's true. Thanks a lot, Liesel. So remember I said that he lost his license? Well, about a year later, he's formally disbarred. And at that time, he's facing 84 criminal charges. So when he loses his license, kind of like a temporary measure. It's like, we're not sure about you. It doesn't look good. We're going to just take your license away and take your name off the stationery. But maybe you'll come back later on once you've gone to rehab, only for it to turn out, well, the iceberg's a lot bigger underwater. When you go below the surface, there's a lot more going on. 84 criminal charges, 11 lawsuits. The next day, a grand jury announces an indictment against Murdaugh on double murder charges in the death of Margaret and Paul. Two sources close to the investigation say that the authorities have cell phone video that they believe not only puts Murdaugh at the scene, but also contradicts a previous timeline of events provided on the day of the killings. Now, in plain English, what does that mean? It means that this cell phone video basically rubbishes his alibi. In other words, he's got a story, right? He's got a story and an alibi, and even his brothers say it's ironclad. And after 13 months, investigators say, you know what, it doesn't look like you do have an alibi. And what we just dealt with today is this caregiver dealing with this thing where he said to her, I was at the house for 40 minutes, when she knew that he was actually only at the house for about 20. Like you kind of have the situation where you think, oh, his mother and father is his alibi. Well, except that his father died and his mother has dementia. Oh, but then his housekeeper can be his alibi, but she's not his alibi either. So then who is his alibi, right? And so you get that whole thing of what did we say earlier? Fraudulent pretense. What? Let me see if I can find that again. Is it accused of fraudulent intent? But wasn't there something about something in pretense? I thought I saw something about fraudulent pretense or something. Can you guys remember something about pretense? Breach of trust, fraudulent intent. I thought there was something about pretense, but anyway. Okay. So something else I wanted to mention is the many faces of Murdaugh. Look how he appears over here, almost unrecognizable to the guy on the other side. Look how that person and this person look totally different. And there's also, we've got pictures of him where he looks quite bloated and quite overweight. He really seems to have many faces, doesn't he? Yeah, that's true. That's true. False pretense. That's it. Okay. And I think when you see someone that just physically can look so different. We also saw that with Brian Koberger. I think when you see someone who their appearance goes through this incredible spectrum, they are heavy, then they're thin. They are lots of hair and then no hair. They look one way and then they look another. I think when you see such extreme fluctuations in someone's appearance, I think that also speaks about drugs. I also think that shows someone's identities. It's almost like a compass needle that's sort of spinning around. When someone's appearance changes that drastically, they're not anchored to the real world, they're anchored to drugs. And with drugs, they're feeling different. They've got a sense of themselves one day like this, another day like that, right? And one's always got to be careful with that. Another perpetrator whose appearance changed drastically during his court appearance was Henry von Murdaugh. And there's also a drug narrative associated with him, where people said maybe he was on this or maybe he was on that. But he also went from being very, somewhat overweight and looking a certain way. He had a beard, then he had a shaved head, then he looked like this and he looked like that. Also very true with him. Chris says, what is the body count on this family? It's that's the question. Dover says his baldness was because of the gunshot wound to the head. But the issue is, even if you take this image away, how he looks in court now and how he looked in some other pictures with his family, he looks very different. He kind of looks like a pudgy relative of Santa Claus in a way. The guy behind me looks like he's lost weight. He looks quite presentable. He doesn't look like a sort of a rich pig. Excuse the term. Okay. So that video evidence disputed the timeline. So that's the first thing to say. Thanks, Zenaida. But the other thing is, they say it was very clear from day one that law enforcement and the Attorney General prematurely concluded that Alex was responsible for the murder of his wife and son. And that's what Murdaugh's lawyers said. But we know that Alex did not have any motive whatsoever to murder them. So one of the best arguments that the that his defense, that his lawyers have, that his best defense is basically, what's the motive? And I think motive in cases involving drugs are always hard to show, because when you are dealing with a drug addict, the way they think isn't the way that lines up with a lot of other things, right? But the other thing that I think is quite interesting is they say it was very clear from day one that law enforcement prematurely concluded Alex was responsible. Actually, that's not true. And his defense in the opening statement said there was a rush to judgment. You often hear that in defense arguments, that somebody unfairly targeted someone and there was a rush to judgment. But the fact is, they got a search warrant to search the Murdaugh home, and it was dated, I think, June 8th or something like that. And they only served that search warrant in September. That doesn't show premature rush to judgment. Also, they only charge him 13 months later. That doesn't seem like premature rush to judgment. But that's their legal argument. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. It's kind of like the slowest rush you've ever seen. So no matter when they're going to charge him, they're going to say, no, you rush to judgment, kind of thing. So do you think charging Murdaugh with murder more than a year after the crimes and many years after the death of the housekeeper and Stephen Smith, do you think that was a rush to judgment? And I think Brian Kohberger could theoretically argue, just as part of a bunch of arguments, that there's a rush to judgment with him. That, you know what, you charged me with murder in like less than 2 months. How do you know for sure that it was me? You know what I mean? Couldn't there be other possibilities? And in exactly the same way here, that you have this story that there are 2 shooters who came from the boat incident, and they came with deadly intent. They just didn't come armed, and they just hoped that they could pick up one of Paul's guns lying around, because they're always lying around, right? It's kind of like the Ramsey story. I've come here to kill John Benet Ramsey, but I forgot to bring a pen and paper for the ransom note, and I forgot to bring a murder weapon. And also ended up forgetting John Benet behind as part of the kidnapping as well. Totally absurd. But in this story, you kind of got the story of that 2 accomplices killed Paul and Maggie, and then ran away with the weapons. But they didn't come there with their own weapons. They came there with deadly intent, but they didn't come there with their own weapons. The problem with that old story is, because he doesn't have an alibi, you kind of have the situation where his original story that he fell asleep in front of the television with the TV on, I guess, makes it quite unlikely that someone would commit double murder while someone else is right there. Why wouldn't you kill him as well? Suppose you could say, so that they could get money from him or something. I don't know. But if you think about this whole idea of accomplice, it's the same bullshit defense, the same nonsense, in my opinion, that certain people are trying to apply to Brian Kohberger. If you want to give Kohberger a defense, if you want to try and get him off then play along with the accomplice theory. That's exactly what the defense in the Murdaugh case are doing, right? It just kind of raises doubt. And if you want Kohberger, if Kohberger committed this crime and you want him to get away with it, well then add fuel to the whole accomplice theory. Okay, let's finish up here. So the authorities only searched the Murdaugh home in September, 2 full months after the murders. If there had been laundry in the washer or a shotgun lying around, these were long gone by then. It does make you wonder if they'd searched it the very next day, or like the 8th, what would they have found? It does make one wonder. Okay, so according to ABC7, it's the article you see on screen right now, prosecutors allege financial insurance fraud crimes as possible motive. Prosecutors allege Murdaugh killed them to gain sympathy and shift the focus away from his alleged financial wrongdoings. So let me ask you now, does that motive resonate with you? That's the position of the prosecution. Does that motive resonate with you? If it does, put up a 1, and if it doesn't, put up a 2. Does this resonate with you, this idea that he committed these crimes to gain sympathy and shift focus away from his financial wrongdoings? Does that resonate with you? If you think it does, put up a 1. If you think it doesn't, put up a 2. So I'm seeing 1, Dawn Warfield puts up a 2, Wolfie 2, Cheryl 1, Anne-Marie, Cat Lady 1, Kelsey 2, Jane Gardner 1. It's kind of a mixed bag. Kelly Sharp 2, Tina Vitava 2, Paul 1, Wombat 2. It's kind of a mixed bag. It's quite 50-50. Dover says I'm on the fence about that. And you know, it's a problem. It's a problem that there's this iffy response to the motive. Do you agree with that? The prosecution have got quite a strong case. I'd say I'd give their circumstantial case a 6 or a 7 out of 10. I don't know if it meets that standard for beyond reasonable doubt. It's almost like at that point, right? And then I think what they need to get over the beyond reasonable doubt threshold is they need to provide a motive. And I don't think this motive gets them there. I don't think that this motive is really sufficient, in my opinion. I mean, if the motive was to get sympathy, did he get sympathy? He didn't. If the motive was to distract, did it distract? No. So I don't know. I don't kind of get that sense. I don't really get the sense that it was to get sympathy or to distract. And so if that wasn't the motive, what was the motive? Now, the other side of it is we are dealing with an individual who seems to be a pretender, who seems to be a manipulator, who does seem to be very emotional. So the emotions do seem to play a huge role in getting sympathy, but also showing things in a certain way. But because he's such a powerful figure, I really don't think that he's trying to get people to feel sorry for him. I think that's a part of it, but I don't think it's the entire part of it. Do you guys agree with that? Erin says, put the blame on somebody else. That I think is the main reason. That I think is also the main reason. Is he's trying to put the blame onto someone else, and he's trying to get what he wants at the end of the day. So I don't think it's about getting sympathy, but I do think it's intended to misdirect. I also think that there was possibly a reason behind it as well. Did Paul know something? Did Maggie know something? I mean, Maggie was looked like she was gonna divorce him. Did you know that Maggie's, I used to know the name. What's the name of the beach house? It starts with an E. The beach house that Maggie was living in, where Alex celebrated his 54th birthday, belonged to Maggie, and it was worth more than $900,000. Edisto, that's it, right? So if Maggie died, guess who inherited that house? And if he sold the house, the proceeds from that. That's a fact, by the way. And by the way, he did inherit that house, and he did inherit the proceeds, right? Edisto Beach, that's it. So the fact that his wife was already looked like she was separated from him, they were living apart, and then she dies, is that because he wants sympathy, or is that because he actually maybe wants the same idea that I'm talking about, his father dying? Is that because he wants to control financial outcomes, which is what he's been doing all along, trying to control financial outcomes? Run the World says that's not a lot of money to kill over. Okay, I don't know whether he thought that. $900,000 it is a lot of money if you don't have it, and if you, yeah, I don't know. You know, if you're greedy, a small amount of money that you've got to pay is a lot of money. Like, although Murdaugh promised that he'd pay the son of the housekeeper $100,000, he said that was likely. He didn't pay a dime. So you could argue that $100,000 is not a lot. Well, to him it is obviously a lot, too much. So when I originally read that, I scoffed. You know, prosecutors alleged that Murdaugh killed to gain sympathy, but that's before knowing just how deep the financial and fraud rabbit hole goes. It's around about $10 million, right? That's a lot of money to hide and a lot of money to lose. You must remember, if you've made 10 million, but it's not really your money, that's quite a lot of money not to have, if you know what I'm saying. Right? If you've gotten 10 million, but not an honest way, then technically you don't really have any money. And so maybe you want inheritance money, especially because of lawsuits and things like that, or potential lawsuits. And I mean, he was facing lawsuits. I still maintain that it's a poorly expressed motive, right? So this would be my motive. This is the motive I would give to the jury if I was the prosecutor. And I don't think you've got to be like a psychologist where you've got to prove to the jury that you know the absolute inner workings of the criminal mind, right? I don't think you've got to give an extremely detailed motive. I think you can give if you can, great. But I think you can also give a somewhat broader motive. So if I was the prosecutor, I would give this as the motive. Tell me if you agree with this one. They weren't legally separated. They were just living apart at that point. So if you look at that motive, welcome Yvonne. If you say the motive here was greed, from the beginning till the end, the motive, the thing that has been running through all of this is greed, avarice, and specifically for money, for good times, for the easy life, for a life free from consequence on the largest possible scale, but in a word, greed. And it's also it's greed, but also getting away with things. It's having things without consequences, right? And isn't that in a way the way we think of rich people, in a way that they are not fettered by the troubles that we are fettered with, but sometimes do they maybe take that too far, where they should be fettered with the same consequences that we are, right? So if you agree with my motive, put a 1. If you don't agree with it, put a 2. And if you've got a better one, put up your motive. In other words, isn't that all that the jury needs to be convinced of? Is that the individual we're talking about would do anything for money and did a lot because of money, that he basically became overcome by his own greed. Drugs had a role in that, and a part of the good life and the high life was getting high and getting drunk, but then also wanting to be free of those consequences. Oh, it's good to see quite a few of you agreeing with that. Thanks a lot. Yeah, it's like having your cake and eating it. I don't think there's a better. Can you see how the financial crimes actually dominate this whole narrative? The murders are shocking, but the financial crimes, I mean, there's over 100, totally dominate the story. And so that's at the heart of the story. In the same way with the Brian Koberger case, the crimes at the end are very, very shocking. But what dominates his story is the whole incel thing, and to some extent the heroin episode. But the whole incel thing is the thing that is really the heart, the meat and potatoes of his psychology. It's not something that he had directly against the victims. So what do we mean when we just say the word greed? What is it? I know we all know what it means, but kind of what does it mean?
Greed.
Intense and selfish desire for something, especially wealth, power, or food. What do you think the greed was in this case? Do you think it was for food? Do you think it was for power? He already had power. You could argue that as the middle child that he didn't, but he already had a lot of power. Do you think it was greed for wealth, power, or do you think it was just greed for more, right? I'm greedy, I'm selfish. Well, what do you want? I just want more. Just like a general thing. I just want more. So it's not just ordinary selfishness. It's not ordinary selfish desire. It's intense. It's extreme. And isn't that the individual that we're dealing with here? It's avarice, greediness, acquisitiveness, rapacity, materialism, money grabbing, gluttony, self-indulgence, overconsumption. There's also talk that Murdaugh was having an affair. I don't know whether that's true, but there's talk of that. Appetite, craving, thirst, impatience for my inheritance. And that's the opposite of being generous, patient, temperate, mild-mannered, all those kinds of things. If you look at the excess emotion that you see here, isn't there a link between that and the greed that's going on? So if I was the prosecutor, I wouldn't go into looking for sympathy. I would go into greed, and I would describe him as he is someone who seems to pretend and seems to manipulate. Okay, the last thing I want to say is Murdaugh is someone who seems to use his emotions excessively and seems particularly emotional, and perhaps he's used that in the past to gain sympathy and as a distraction. Perhaps his primary flaw is feeling sorry for himself when his family are apparently so powerful. And if you look at this family photo, so first of all, take a look at the man behind me, right? The face behind me. Take a good look and compare that face to this face. Look how different he looks there. And look how he's kind of lost in all these other faces. There is his father, and he's kind of invisible in this picture. There's his mother, there's his father, and he's not even in the front, the sort of front line of this thing. He's right in the back. His two sons are closer to his father, who's being celebrated here, than what he is. And so did he not want to be so invisible, or did he feel impatient to get what was due to him? In the movie Gladiator, do you remember Commodus, who was impatient to become Caesar, and what he did? Yeah, and so you kind of got to ask the question, was all of this about trying not to be so invisible? Was it the same thing in the Brian Koberger case, that he didn't want to be so invisible, that he wanted to stick out? So maybe he felt very much in the background, lost and powerless and helpless within so much family power. There's a lot of family power, but he's sort of lost inside it. And at this point in the story, it's a power that is still held by his father. The defense have portrayed Murdaugh as a loving father and a husband who did not butcher his family. But I'm not sure what's loving about 100 charges. Right? About a month ago, so if you say that Murdaugh was like a loving guy, how loving was he towards the son of the housekeeper? How loving was he towards the caregiver? So about a month ago, a grand jury added 9 additional charges of tax evasion. That brings us almost to the present. A grand jury indicts Murdaugh on 9 counts of tax evasion, allegedly he failed to pay almost $487,000. Now, someone said a few moments ago, $900,000 is not a lot of money. Well, he's trying to avoid paying half of that, while making nearly $14 million over 9 years, $14 million. With the latest indictment, the total financial related charges are more than 100. That's from NBC News. So it all starts somewhere. It all starts with that first time that you trick somebody. Big things have small beginnings. You trick somebody and you get away with it, and no one suspects you because you are part of this whole legacy, right? Your legacy protects you, and then you do one additional thing, and you get away with that. Then you do another thing, and you get away with that, and then you go bigger and bigger and bigger. Where does that road end? So one has the impression of Murdaugh as a glutton and a hedonist. Don't you kind of get that idea? That, yeah, you can see he's also a very different, he's got a very different face to the person you see right behind me. You can almost not reconcile the person you see behind me and the person you see in this picture. The person you see behind me looks like a professional, respectable person, and the person you see on the boat seems like kind of an ordinary Joe in a way. So there's one picture of him, there's another picture of him. And one does wonder what is his own self-esteem? Like when he looks in the mirror, what does he see? Does he see the prestige, or does he feel trapped by it? Does he see the prestige, or does he feel, I don't have enough, I should be on the top of this pile of gold kind of thing? So if you think you're standing there looking at a man in a white shirt, wondering why he's sweating, but the shirt he's wearing isn't, why there's blood everywhere but not on his hands, despite him saying he touched the victims. If you're wondering why someone may have thought they could commit a crime like this and get away with it, it may be because they've been committing dozens and eventually over 100 smaller little crimes and gotten away with those. And you kind of get the idea when you look at this picture. If I put on a nice, clean white shirt, that's enough. If I put on a nice, clean white shirt, you can see I'm not putting on a clean black shirt. I'm not putting on a clean red shirt. I'm not putting on a clean blue shirt. You can see on this clean white shirt, I'm putting on the robes of innocence, right? And you can just see, look how plain it is. And isn't that something that he was used to doing with the paperwork? For example, putting natural cause of death with a housekeeper. And you just make it plainly obvious that I didn't do anything wrong, except maybe not. And so eventually small lies beget bigger lies, small crimes, bigger crimes, small cons, bigger cons, and the rabbit hole gets deeper and deeper and wider. And then what is it that Mycroft, Sherlock Holmes' brother, what did he say again? He said, no one deceives like an addict. Well, isn't that how it started? And so that's quite a long way to go from, or to get down to, is from this person here to that person. From this person here. Handsome, respectable, got the world at his feet, and he must know that as well. Part of a powerful family, part of a powerful tradition, from this to that. It's quite a contrast, isn't it? Quite a shocking contrast. That's right. Yeah. And so with a family that is so privileged, you and within the whole legal thing, you can imagine that there weren't consequences for a really long time, and then suddenly there were. Let me show you that contrast again. From this young man with this sort of shimmer in his eyes, right? He's kind of got the whole world laid out in front of him. You just need to step into this, and the world's your oyster. And then that's where it ends. That's where that shimmer in his eye ends, right? Thanks a lot, Gail. Thank you. Wolfie says, I wonder if he was good at one time. I'm sure he was. But maybe, have you heard the saying, spare the rod and spoil the child? Okay, so that's my spiel. I've been on for 2 hours, 16 minutes. Do any of you guys want to hear a bit more about today's testimony? In terms of what the caregiver said and how she said it. You guys want to go back to that? But I want you to think about the powerful personality of like this white collar dude, right? This guy who's become sort of that guy, who's ultimately become that guy. But this white collar dude who started off as this person, who is talking to the caregiver and trying to sort of wield his influence. And does he succeed? Thanks, Kate and Lisa. Lisa's in Oregon, right? Kate, thanks a lot. Okay, so let's see if I can pull that up. Let's close this.
Was he telling you that? Did he ask you anything about that when he was talking to you?
Are you sick?
Okay, well, we'll let that ad play, but do you notice how she is actually unable to talk because she's so emotional? And what's so important to appreciate here is she's so emotional because she's talking about the moment she realized that she didn't believe, not that she didn't believe what he was saying, but what he was asking her to say and what that meant, right? And so she's just remembering that at this moment that he says to her, I was at the house on the night of the murders for 40 minutes. When she remembers that and also knows that actually was only there for 20, she's extremely emotional because she's realizing at that moment the person that she trusted has possibly betrayed her and done something terrible. And that means her life's, not her life's over, but her, how can I put it? Her link to the family is also over. You know, you can imagine this was a great job to have with one of the most respected families in the state. And then to lose that position is also personally a setback. But look how long it takes her to gather herself emotionally, because she's realizing these people that I trusted, dot, dot, dot. I'm going to just take it back a little bit.
What was he telling you about? And I'm not 100% following you. He was telling you or saying to you that he was at the house? When?
The night of the murders.
The night of the murders?
Yes.
What was he telling you about that he was at the house the night of the murder?
So look at Alex Murdaugh's face. So here he's very interested in hearing the answer, right? There's no head bobbing like this. There's no snot. He's simply staring at her. And you can imagine what's going through his heart and mind doing that. Doesn't he wish she would be on the stand simply saying, yeah, exactly what he said to her to say?
That he'd been there 30 to 40 minutes.
Was he telling you that?
And that's the statement that gets her to become so emotional. The lawyer says to her flippantly, was he telling you that? Right? Meaning he was actually saying, I was there for 40 minutes. And through that's a symbolic statement. It means I need you to do this and this and this. It's not true. And so dot, 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 right? And she realizes that. Look how emotional she was. And what I try to convey at the beginning of this live stream is just a few seconds ago, she was actually laughing at the whole, what does repass mean? I think that was the word. And within a few seconds of that, she's actually crying because of her realization of what the actual thing was, what was going on in the story.
Did he ask you anything about that when he was talking to you?
Yes.
Did he indicate to you what he wanted you to do with that information?
No. No.
What did he say?
He just said that he was at the house for 30 to 40 minutes. I said.
You said what? Was he there 30 or 40 minutes that night?
Not to my recall.
Why are you crying, Ms. Smith?
So do you notice how she's almost unable to talk? So when she does talk, it's almost like she's lost her breath. It's because she's nervous. It's because she's sitting there with her former employer right in front of her. Now you might say, actually, he didn't employ her, but it's basically the Murdaugh family are in an embarrassing situation, and she could theoretically help them in this embarrassing situation, but she's not doing that. And she feels, I think, embarrassed and frightened at the same time, right? She doesn't want to, I think, be talking about what she's talking about. But what comes through is she seems to be so frightened that she's struggling to even speak. Damn. So I was just trying to go back a couple of steps.
Yes.
Did he indicate to you what he wanted you to do with that information?
No. No.
What did he say?
He just said that he was at the house for 30 to 40 minutes. I said.
Do you notice that as well? She says, he said I was at the house for 34 minutes, and she says, I said, and she cuts herself off. And then she gets like really emotional. And you kind of think that what's going through her mind is that she wanted to say, yeah, but you weren't at the house 40 minutes. And now in front of all these people, she can't actually get those words out.
You said what? Was he there 30 or 40 minutes that night?
Not to my recall.
Why?
Now, in a way, and I know it's kind of oversimplifying it, but in a way, the entire case revolves around this moment, because it's basically, if he was there for 40 minutes, theoretically, he has an alibi. If he wasn't there for 40 minutes and he's asking someone to say that he was, then doesn't it seem like he doesn't have an alibi? If he doesn't have an alibi, you've got all these other problems, the problem with the shirt and so on and so on, then what are we actually talking about here? You know, if he hasn't been truthful about his movements that night, you could say, yeah, he did all sorts of financial fraud things. This is totally different. But in a situation where, well, if he's not been truthful about where he was that night, and he's not been truthful about all these other things, then what are we really talking about?
Keep crying, you said.
Because they're a good family, and I love working there. And I'm
So the lawyer asked a really good question, and it's good that he doesn't just let this moment slide. He says, "Why are you crying?" And she says, "Because it was important for me to work for this family, and I've always thought of them as a good family, and it meant a lot to me." And so that is what's being lost in this moment. This is a moment where she's acknowledging that what she thought was good maybe wasn't good. That what, right? So that's being exposed on a public stage, right? And I think her tears are a very authentic moment in this trial. Don't you agree? It's a sense of a very unpolished sense of what someone at the heart of this case was thinking and feeling.
Did he indicate to you what he wanted you to do with that information?
no.
What did he say?
He just said that he was at the house for 30 or 40 minutes. That's it.
You said what? Was he there 30 or 40 minutes that night?
Not to my recall.
Why are you crying?
So that's her way of saying no. He wasn't there for 40 minutes. Do you notice how it's almost like her mouth has gone dry when that question is asked?
Because they're a good family, and I love working there. And I'm sorry all this happened. They're good people, you know.
He wasn't there no 30 or 40 minutes, was he?
No.
Can't leave the witness.
Did that conversation upset you?
Somewhat.
You upset right now?
Yes,
Did you call anybody about it?
my brother.
You called your brother after that conversation was out
Yes.
to tell him about that conversation.
Yes.
And just to be clear, what was the statement he said about how long he was here?
30 to 40 minutes.
But his phrase was, I was here, or you know
I was here 30 to 40 minutes.
So what we're dealing with here is at his father's own sort of visitation ceremony. So his father's died, and he's now in his mother's house dealing with his father's funeral, and he goes to the caregiver of his mother, and he says to her, I was here 30 to 40 minutes, right? Meaning, on June 7th, the night that my wife and child were killed, I came here for 30 to 40 minutes. But that's not how long he was there. Apparently, he was only there 15 to 20 minutes.
Not deprived, but I can't help it sometimes. What else is going on in your life right there?
Just working hours and hours.
You're whispering. I can't understand what you're saying.
When you gonna get married?
I was planning on getting married. I was planning on to.
And had Alex Murdaugh mentioned anything to you about your upcoming nuptials?
Yes.
And when was that?
Day afterwards, I'm thinking.
The day after this?
I'm thinking it was,
After
yes.
the conversation you
Yes.
just said? Where were you?
At the house.
And what did he say about your marriage, your upcoming potential marriage?
I heard you was getting married. I said, yes. He said, if I could, you just let me know because the wedding's going to be expensive. I said, well, thank you.
The wedding's gonna be
He
expensive?
said, wedding's going to be expensive. I said, well, thank you.
Did he offer to help?
Yes, he offered. That's the type of person, a good person.
So there you kind of have, on the one day, I was here for 30 to 40 minutes, and then a day or two later, oh, you're getting married. Wedding's going to be quite expensive, right? And so if you look at this as a little microcosm of how he could have maybe dealt with other situations in that long 11 years span, then you can kind of get a sense of how the strings are pulled, right?
He ever mentioned the wedding to you before?
No.
Did you mention that to him before?
No.
Hey, did he have a conversation, anything else about your job? Were you working at the school?
Yes, at the school. Yes.
Did Mr. Murdaugh mention to you about your school and your position there?
Yes.
Tell him what he said, please.
He said that, if you need a position at school, my good friend is there. I said, yeah, I know. Worked at the school, the principal.
Hey, what's that?
Okay, so that's the one clip I wanted to show you. And now I'm going to pull up another one. Just see if I can find it here. So this is the one dealing with that his mother didn't know that he was there. It's this one.
Did he tell you why he was there?
No, he just came to see his mother.
Did he talk to his mother?
But she was asleep, yes.
She was asleep? Okay. And what did he do? What did Alex Murdaugh do when his mother was asleep?
He came and sat on the bed because we was asking while I was watching. I said, American Says, I said, a game show.
So the reason that she can be quite accurate about, and this is quite bad luck for Murdaugh, the reason why she can be quite accurate about the time that he was there is because she was watching something on television. And by the time he arrived, I guess the show was on. And by the time that he left, I guess the show was over, right? And I don't know what the length of the show was exactly, but what is interesting is if you think about the innocent version where he goes to see his mother, and you think, well, he goes to see his mother, and then do they have a cup of tea, or do they have dinner together, or do they watch television? And literally, it appears that he goes to his mother. The housekeeper sees him there. He lies on his mother's bed. He plays on his phone for about 10 minutes and then he leaves. That's kind of this what do you call it? This touching moment between mother and son is actually just that he goes to his mother, hangs out for a while, and then that's kind of his alibi, right? Because when you hear her description, it's basically his mother's not even awake. They don't actually even talk to one another. And he's on his phone while he's on his mother's bed. And his mother, according to her, didn't even know that he was there, wasn't even really aware that he was there.
Did he say anything to his mama?
We said, hey, Mom, how you doing? You know, just came to check up on you. Yeah.
Did he say why he'd come to check up on her?
Because Dad was in the hospital, you know, call him Hansel. Yeah, was in the hospital.
And in your opinion, as being there, her caregiver, did she even know that he was there?
No.
Yes, no.
So what I want you to do is I'm going to go back about 5 seconds. Hopefully it doesn't jump into an ad break. But have a look at Murdaugh touching his face. He kind of goes like this. And that's a sign of discomfort. That's a sign that he's not liking where this conversation's going, right? Bear in mind, he's supposed to have an alibi, and until this caregiver's testified, he sort of has had an alibi, right? Obviously, the audio hasn't helped him, but if anything's going to sort of sink the last nail into his coffin, it's this. But what I want you to look at is the way that he rubs his face as this information is being brought to the surface.
Was asleep.
He came in still in the bed because we was asking what I was watching. I said American Says, I said a game show.
Did he say anything to his mama?
We said, hey, Mom, how you doing? You know, just came to check up on you. Yeah.
Did he say why he'd come to check up on her?
Because Dad was in the hospital, you know, call him Hansel. Yeah, was in the hospital.
And in your opinion, as being there, her caregiver, did she?
So there you can see he's sort of rubbing his mouth, and I've got a feeling that what he's thinking is, oh shit. And the reason is because I don't think he thought that the caregiver would have remembered something like that she was watching a particular TV show. The fact that she does remember it means there's now an additional timestamp that you can actually probably go back and look at the time that the show was on, the time that it ended, the time that when he left, was the show still on, all that kind of thing. In other words, I think he's quite, I think there's a sense here that his goose is cooked. Don't you get that sense? Putting your hands in front of your mouth is like horror. It's like, oh shit, right? And you'll notice when she mentions that show's on, that he looks down and it looks like he takes a note, right? Let's watch that again. Yeah, so Kelly says it's a 30-minute show. There you go. There you go. Screwed, yeah. Right, so let's just watch that again.
Because we was asking what I was watching. I said American Says, I said a game show.
You see, the moment she says that, he looks down, and I mean, he's been staring her down. Now he breaks eye contact, and now he sort of makes a note of that. But the full portent of what she said is starting to sort of dawn on him, right?
Did he say anything to his mama?
We said, hey, Mom, how you doing? You know, just came to check up on you. Yeah.
Did he say why he'd come to check up on her?
Because Dad was in the hospital, you know, call him Hansel. Yeah, was in the hospital.
And in your opinion, as being there, her caregiver, did she even know that he was there?
No.
Yes, no. The objection's overruled.
You said no?
I also think that's quite interesting how the the lawyer objects to the fact that his mother didn't know he was there and that the judge overrules it. In other words, it's pretty clear that him going there, it's an alibi on paper. It's like I was somewhere else and my mother was there. But if you don't know any more about it, you might think, oh, that's good enough. Your mother can vouch for you, whatever. Except it turns out that it's not quite that way. And you can see he's looking down at this point again. He's been wanting to stare down the caregiver. You kind of get the idea that if they've had an arrangement, he wants to maintain eye contact. Well, now he's breaking eye contact. Now you kind of get a sense of how do you think he's feeling when you see him there? He's just sort of put his hand over his face. It's not a gesture you see very often, right? Now he's looking down.
No, mother, no.
How long did he stay in the room with y'all? When I say y'all, for the record, you and Miss Libby, I apologize.
About 15 to 20 minutes. 20 minutes.
Was he moving around the room?
No, he was laying on the bed.
Did he have his phone with him?
Yes.
Was he looking at his phone?
Yes, he was on his phone, yes.
I'm sorry, ma'am. What?
Yes. Mhm.
So can you see he's still looking down and he doesn't look none too happy. She's just said, now think about it. You drive all the way to your mother, lie on her bed. She's basically sleeping. It's fairly late at night. And you lie on her bed, look at your phone, and then leave after about 15 minutes. It's not much of a mother-son bonding moment, is it? It's not much of a, what is the point of him going there? And I think you know what the answer is, but if you think of it like that actually happened, what is the point of him going there?
After that initial conversation, you said he said, I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
Did he have any other attempt to have any other conversation with Miss Libby?
No.
Okay. Did he hold your hand out? Did he ever hold her hand?
Yes, he did hold her.
hold her?
Yeah, mhm.
Did you talk to her?
Yeah, she was in the bed, yeah. Yes.
And her condition then was what?
She was, sleep off and on, sleep.
Okay. Now, I've said this before, I've written about 3 trilogies on the Ramsey case, and some of the best insights by far you get from the 3 housekeepers. The housekeepers know the routines, the housekeepers know the internal dynamics, the habits, all that kind of thing. And so you kind of get a similar insight, a very personal, intimate portrait of just a moment inside that house, almost like having a CCTV camera inside, from the caregiver showing you exactly what is happening, that someone was sleeping, that she, how long the person was there, and all that kind of thing. You get some incredible insights into, especially rich families, through some of the people that are employees, right? And it looks like you have the same thing here. And then the third thing that I want to show you, I think we may have touched on it already, is over here.
How long did he stay in the room with y'all? When I say y'all, for the record, you and Miss Libby, I apologize.
About 15 to 20 minutes. 20 minutes.
Did he stay in the room with y'all? When I say y'all, for the record, you and Miss Libby, I apologize.
About 15 to 20 minutes.
You notice the moment she says that, he looks down. It's a blow to his defense. It's a setback, and it's arguably the biggest and worst setback thus far. Just again, just watch his response just when he hears the time, because probably what he wants to hear here is, oh, he was there for 40 minutes.
How long did he stay in the room with y'all? When I say y'all, for the record, you and Miss Libby, I apologize.
About 15 to 20 minutes. 20 minutes.
Was he moving around the room?
No, he was laying on the bed.
There's also another moment where he.
When I say y'all, for the record, you and Miss Libby, I apologize.
About 15 to 20 minutes. 20.
Did he stay in the room with y'all? When I say y'all, for the record, you and Miss.
Okay, it's going back to an ad break. Anyway, that moment was the one that I really wanted to show you, is where he drags his mouth like that. And there's another, in the clip that I've just played you, there's another moment where he sort of does this. His mouth goes into like a reverse, like upside down coat hanger thing. He sort of goes like that. That's kind of a micro expression that's not it's not a very good sign for him. Christine says she won, he looked away. So I haven't actually been following this case that closely. I find the spoiled rich dude thing kind of boring and dull. But it's fair to say that we are dealing with quite a labyrinth here. And I've kind of just wanted to show the depth of the rabbit hole here, and then also just try and show you just a little bit of a one way that a hole has been poked into his case. You're dealing with someone who probably thought they were quite clever when they did something, and they probably didn't expect, or they underestimated the caregiver in this case, and her brother. I don't know whether Murdaugh knew this, but her brother, I think it's her brother, is like the chief of police or the assistant chief of police. And I think it's when she spoke to him that she realized kind of the game's up, and she kind of made a statement. And I think this was weeks later. It's in this video as well. I think it was she was in a car accident or something in September, and that is when this came up, and that's when she told her brother about it. That's besides the conversation she had after this incident. Tina says, I'm following this case because I was following the Paul Murdaugh case. Erin says he didn't think anyone would defy him. Yeah. Dover says, I fall asleep during the boring moments. Okay. I actually literally fell asleep watching some of this testimony. That's why I say if I was the prosecution, I would put up on a flipboard, like, this is the point that we're trying to bring across. I guess the weakness with that is that the defense could look at that and then just try and undermine it. Like the defense could literally look at, oh, I'm trying to make the point of that, and then so that's the weakness to being that explicit about it. Iceland says aloha, by the way. It's hard to follow because of how he looks, but entertaining how he reacts. Okay. Tina says, I watched the entire OJ trial. So that's my spiel. Before I go, I want to let you guys know about something else. Let's see if I can find it. So I put up a teaser on my channel a couple of days ago. It's got that sort of image on it. And the whole idea is it's around this question of, it's sort of both, what is mankind's greatest achievement? By the way, if you came here for the Murdaugh trial and you only want to hear about the Murdaugh trial, we're going to now make a little bit of small talk. So if you have got more important things to do, now is your chance to head out the door. But for those of you who are interested, I I really wish I had that National Geographic in front of me. Maybe I'll go and fetch it in a moment. But I wanted to tell the story of mankind's greatest achievement, but kind of next to that is mankind's greatest story, right? What is our greatest story collectively? What is the greatest story that belongs to us? And I've heard a lot of people say, well, it's the story of Jesus. I don't mean what is done for us. And I don't mean for me in a biblical sense. I just mean, like if we go to the moon, God didn't say, like in the Bible, I predict that you'll go to the moon and I will protect you, whatever. That was entirely a human endeavor in the sense that people decided that's what they wanted to do. And maybe God blessed that endeavor and God, what I'm saying. So I'm not really interested in the, I'm interested in a story that people conceived for themselves, like climbing Mount Everest. That's another example. Is God didn't say go and climb that mountain. Maybe he did for some people, but for a lot of people, it's a personal thing. Is I want to go and climb that mountain, and maybe God helps you do that. But the story that I want to tell is the story of what when human beings decided to do something, and what they ended up doing was remarkable, and also it wasn't even intentional. They didn't intend to do what they did, but they did it. And faith definitely had a place in that story. But the point I'm trying to make is it's not really a story about what God did for us or whatever. It's a story of what is a story that came from our history, if I can put it that way, in the sense of we're going to try and do something. And the story has got to do with just trying to find a different route to the east. That's really all that it's got to do. And that's not, it's not like God said, thou shalt find another route to the, it was a totally practical, business-like thing that people are trying to do. And it ended up being something that led to this great story, this really incredible story. And that's a story I kind of want to share with you guys. And as you can see on screen, mankind's greatest achievement is also a myth. So in the same way that the first man on the moon, all the pictures you see of the first man on the moon are actually Buzz Aldrin. There are literally no photos, no proper photos of Neil Armstrong on the moon. In the same way, there are no photos of the first guy on the top of Mount Everest, Sir Edmund Hillary. Those are all photos of Tenzing Norgay. And so in the same way, this story that I want to tell you, everyone has an idea of this story, and the real story is actually quite different. And so that's the story I want to tell you guys. So what I'm going to be doing is, let me put this up a little bit bigger. What I'm going to be doing is, when I went on holiday a couple of weeks ago, I was all along the coast and I recorded footage of the sea and waves and the movement of water against ships in harbor and all that kind of thing. And the reason was I wanted to do justice to this story. I sort of felt like if you're going to do a video about this, you can't just sort of have your face, you want some atmosphere and things from reality. So I literally went and I took footage all over the place, Cape Town, Plettenberg Bay, the Wild Coast, and so on. And I was just trying to get impressions of the sea in order to tell the story in a fairly authentic way. And so I'm hoping to tell that story within the next couple of days. So I hope you will, even if you're not really interested in it, even if it's not your thing, I hope you'll make the effort to check it out. And so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be putting it up as sort of a teaser. So I'll be putting up, let's say, the first 5 minutes or whatever of maybe 15 minutes or 20 minutes on this channel. And then in order to watch the whole thing, you're going to need to go to the Team Peachtree channel in order to watch the whole thing. It's kind of a way of launching the Team Peachtree channel. That channel is supposed to be about inspiring stories, not just blood, death, betrayal, crime, darkness, and so on. It's about what is inspiring in our world. What are some of our best and brightest moments? And then also how we maybe misunderstand some of those moments, some of those heroic moments that we misunderstand or don't acknowledge properly. So I hope you guys will check that out. And I'd also want to invite you guys to subscribe to the Team Peachtree channel. Please do if you haven't already. And anyway, that's going to be coming up in the next couple of days, so look out for that. Stephanie's just put the link up there for you. But the whole Team Peachtree channel is supposed to be about things like travel and fitness and sport and things that are about life, whereas True Crime Rocket Science are about broken people and tragedy and death and also truth and justice, but it's about a lot heavier topics. And so I want to kind of start emphasizing a little bit more a balanced approach where we also talk about inspiring stories. And, you know, if you look at the cover of this notebook, we want to see the light a little bit more. We want to think about how the sunshine nourishes us and nourishes our lives. If you think about true crime as a cautionary tale, you know, this is for example, the Murdaugh case. This is an example of what can happen with excess wealth. And if you're too selfish, what could happen in that potentially? Well, where do you take that knowledge? If you've survived and you've avoided the pitfalls and you've seen the red flags, what do you do with that? You are alive. You made it through a minefield. Where are places you can go? What are things you could do where you celebrate and enjoy life? And that's really what that channel's all about. So that's really the idea behind that. Let's have a look at some of your comments. So I think we will just spend a few minutes on a brief Q&A. Just oh, Yvonne says I just got my second TCRS notebook. Cool. Erin says okay, I will check it out. Let's have a look at some of your comments. I'll be honest, I just want to see what happens if we sit back at a table. Okay. You never know, you might get your wish. That's what I thought as well. Renee says, can you post a link for the hat that you have? I've not found it. I don't know if Stephanie is going to be able to find it at short notice. Let's see if I can quickly get it. Let me just see if I can. I think I need to go into Patreon and look for a hat. Might be under merch. So if you're interested in getting a hat like the one I've got, you can go to this link. By the way, this is Yvonne wearing a hat like mine, and you can get these hats at Teespring. And it looks like that. So if you're interested, here is the link. Okay. Oh, well done, Stephanie. But anyway, there's the link to it. And yeah, if you're interested in buying one, then there you go. It's just like that. Any other questions or comments? Kelsey says, I'm getting one. If you are getting one, you must send me a selfie and we'll put it up on the YouTube community post. So the moment you get it, take a selfie and send it in. Okay. Erin says, we want to see Timmy. Okay. Timmy, come. Come, boy. Come. Come. Come, boy. Hey, come. Come, boy. Is, I think, a bit camera shy. There you go. Kind of like the Invisible Man. There's Timmy. Is trying to not appear on camera. Let's do that. You might be able to see him a bit better. Okay. Jester says, I'm just settling in. I'll watch the replay. By the way, if you're watching on the replay, you're welcome to hit the thanks button. And also just note that there is this alternative channel. I'm just starting to put things up there, but I'm going to be putting a lot of work into this greatest story never told episode. So look out for that. Tell me, what are you doing? People want to see your face. You see how it kind of looks like Batman? He's like got almost like a black mask. You know, it almost looks like Batman. Hey, are you Batman? Is Timmy coming on my US tour? No, he's not. He's not. He is a distinguished fellow, isn't he? Yeah. Stephanie, thanks for putting that up there. Yin Yang says, hi, just checked in from Norway. That's right, Stephanie. That's probably going to have to be how it's going to have to be. Okay, Timmy, say goodbye. Bye-bye. Okay. Okay, well, that's it for me as well. I'm probably going to go and do a cycle. It's almost 5 o'clock in the morning here. The sun's about to come up. So I'm going to try and get out and about. Zircon says, how's your injury? Are you talking about my cheek? It's still there. It's better, but it is still there. Definitely has the swelling's definitely gone down, but it's not gone away completely. Iceland in Hawaii, have a good night where you are. Thanks a lot for joining us. I'm not sure why this is doing this now. There we go. Okay. Come cycle in San Diego. Who knows? We'll see. Thanks everyone for being here, and thanks for the super chats. Welcome to the new members as well. Thanks a lot, Wolfie. If you are new, whoa, Timmy, that gave me a shock. Just a picture frame that's fallen over. If you are a new subscriber here, welcome to the channel. This was a little bit of an unusual episode, a little bit chaotic. The power outages here have been very weird. We had them like constantly, and then lately it's been like almost like they've forgotten to turn the power off. It's quite strange. There was supposed to be a power outage midnight till 2 in the morning. That's a couple of hours ago. That didn't happen. So it's just really strange. But I do have a plan in the works so that I never have to deal with power outages again. And that'll hopefully be sorted out in a couple of weeks. So Run the World, thanks very much. Thank you. Nice background. Is that Edinburgh? Interesting background. Verbal Judo says you've got to visit South Africa. No ifs or buts. I do want to invite a group of about half a dozen people to to South Africa in October, November next year. So maybe we'll talk about that. And then you guys will appear on the Team Peachtree channel. So the Team Peachtree channel, subscribe to it because more than likely you're going to see yourselves on it. So that's kind of part of the idea. Yeah, so it should be good. Should be good. You know, it's a nice time where it's getting cold in the States, and you can come here and escape winter before it's the middle of summer here. Definitely worthwhile. Okay, guys, Edinburgh Castle. I've actually been to Edinburgh Castle. It's really, and I used to live I lived in Edinburgh for a couple of months when I was living in England. Okay, guys, great seeing you all, and you must have a good night's sleep, and I'll see you guys next time. All the best. October is my birthday month. We won't forget that. Come to South Africa and celebrate your birthday. Bring your family as well. Bring your family as well. Thanks a lot, Mickey. Appreciate it. Terry says her passport is in the works. I also love castles. Timmy, I think it's time that we go. Okay, guys, thanks for being here. I'll see you guys next time. See you.